In this video, we're looking at major events in criminal justice history. Obviously, there are a lot of things that have shaped the criminal justice system, practices, and I'm not going to be able to include all of those. We're not going to talk about every single thing that might have an impact. But I've picked out a couple of different events or time periods that we see major shifts in crime rates, and a couple of events that are particularly notable. But I'm going to go ahead and use that disclaimer that this is not an exclusive list, and you might be able to identify something that's more important than some of the things that we included. We're not going to start at early American history. Obviously, one of the first things that's going to influence the criminal justice system is the adoption of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And we're not talking about every possible influential event. So let's start in the post-Civil War era. We're going to see, this will be one of the first times that we see a very sharp increase in crime due to large-scale immigration within the United States. So immediately after the Civil War, we're going to see a lot of urban growth, the growth of cities, and the resulting social conditions is going to produce increased crime. Let's jump ahead to the 1920s. So Prohibition, the 18th Amendment, led to the growth of organized crime. You can see Al Capone here. We're dumping out some beer into the sewer. This type of crime is not brand new. It's not unheard of at this time, but it's going to propel it into a kind of a mainstream idea. Move forward, 1940s to the 1960s. We're coming out of World War II. We're going to see very stable or decreasing crime rates going into World War II. We send a lot of young men to Europe, and the economy is very strong after World War II. There are jobs, people are working, starting families. So we're gonna see some crime rates decline and stabilize. Then we're going to jump into the 1960s. Not going to see a sharp increase, but we'll see an increase in reported crime. The civil rights movement is one of the most important moments or time periods in criminal justice history. As you go through your courses and you see landmark Supreme Court cases, a lot of the most important ones have a 1960s, 1970s date on the decision. This is a time of really significant change within the criminal justice system, where we're shifting toward individual freedoms rather than government control and strictly crime control. So you have cases like Miranda versus Arizona, Mapp versus Ohio, Gideon versus Wainwright, those types of cases that are focused on the individual's right rather than the government, is a really significant time period. Into the 1970s, we're going to see an increase in reports of serious crime. We're not going to have a dramatic increase, but still increase. And then we get to the 1980s, and we're going to see a very sharp incline of crime rates in general. A lot of it's associated with the crack epidemic, the increased use of illicit drugs and drug sales and violence related to drugs. So when we look at a trend line or a graph of crime rates, you're going to see in the 1980s it's going to kind of go straight up in the air. And then this is not something that's going to affect crime rates very much, but the 1995 bombing in Oklahoma City. This is one of the very first acts of domestic terrorism. We've always been, wary of international terrorism. That's always been a focus, but this is one of the first instances of homegrown extremism within the United States. So that's going to have to create a focal shift and then create a new problem that we'll worry about. And then again, not dealing with crime rates, but significant in the history is the 1999 Columbine High School mass shooting. Pictured here are the victims of that shooting, not including the perpetrators of that shooting. Not the first school shooting, not the last. It's not, no longer the deadliest school shooting, but something that's really going to impact the way we react to active shooters. That's a term that is ubiquitous now. And then going into 2001, obviously the September 11th terrorist attacks that changed everything. We now focus, terrorism is now the FBI's number one priority. And also in that same year, it's actually probably signed the next year, but leading to the passage of the USA Patriot Act. Again, very significant and impactful moment or year in criminal justice history. And then not really, confident in saying like what the next trend will be or what's happened. We can identify some things that have happened post 9/11 into the next couple of decades. Obviously, I'm recording this video in 2021, so we don't have a drastic jump in crimes. Traditional crimes have been steadily declining. We've seen an increase in cyber-based or technological-based crimes. In the early 2000s, there was an increased focus on white-collar crime. But if we look at a graph, this is just the violent crime rate, so not talking about all types of crime, property crime, technological-based crime, but a lot of them will follow this type of line. You can see the mid-'80s, this sharp increase up until the early 90s, and then steadily declining. You're going to hit some peaks here. Here's a little bit of an incline, but nothing significant, coming down to where we are roughly today. So this is something that I've asked, every intro class. Like, how do you feel about crime rates, now compared to 25 years ago? Is crime worse? Is it less significant? And most of the time we get a response that crime is worse now than it was 25 years ago when it's up here. So you can use Google. You can go to the FBI's website for crime rate data, and we'll just kind of hang around and wait until the next event that shapes our criminal justice system. So just go back through, pay attention to the events, major trends, immigration, prohibition, World War II, civil rights. Imprint this in your brain. This is going to show up for you over and over again. This time period, it's so important. Crack epidemic. Here's a couple of events that don't cause crime rates to go up, but individual events that are impactful. And then just kind of an overview of the last 20, 25, 30 years.